This happened almost a month ago, but it's only as of today that I had the wherewithal to start writing it all down. I want to share what happened to me as part vent and part precautionary tale, and so I hope you understand why I'm keeping the details vague. I'm a 21-year-old female and I'm about to graduate college. Since sophomore year, I've worked part-time as a barista at a coffee shop. Up until a few weeks ago, it was a great gig. I was well paid, I got free pastries, and many of my coworkers became close friends of mine. One of said coworkers is relevant to this story, and to protect her privacy, I'll refer to her as Lydia henceforth. Every once in a while, I would get hit on by a patron, but it never escalated beyond a few sometimes creepy comments. I had previously never felt unsafe at my workplace, especially with all my coworkers and regulars around. That changed about a month ago when this whole ordeal began. It was around 4 in the afternoon, a pretty quiet time for the cafe, and I was refilling the pastry display. All of a sudden, Lydia comes up to me and says, "Hey, that guy at table 10 has been staring at you for a really long time. Do you two know each other?" I looked at the corner table and instantly saw the patron in question. He wasn't a regular and he was a lot older than our usual clientele, probably in his late 50s. He had large, light blue eyes and thick worm-like lips. I expected him to look away after I had spotted him, or maybe to give me a suggestive wink and smile. The patron didn't either. Not only did he continue staring at me, but he did so with an expression of pure shock on his face. He looked as though he had seen a ghost. After an awkward staring contest, he rose from his seat and approached the counter. Before I could do my usual spiel, "How was the drink, sir? Can I help you out with anything else today?" the man said. "Angelica. That's not my name, sorry." "Oh, right. It's only a stage name then." His voice was soft and high-pitched, as if atrophied. I had no clue what he was talking about and told him as much, albeit in more polite terms. What followed was a brief but frustrating conversation. The man, seemingly convinced that I was someone else, kept asking me about a video series that he had seen me in. Specifically, he was interested in commissioning me for a video. By the way he danced around the exact content of said videos, I had a feeling that he was alluding to something inappropriate. At one point, he mentioned that name of what I presumed to be the platform he was watching these videos on. I obviously won't give the exact name here, but for the purposes of this account, I'll call it Doves. After some more back and forth, I was starting to think that the guy wasn't completely alright in the head. It would explain his insistence and his generally strange demeanor. However, just as I was about to ask him to leave, the man suddenly went quiet, sighing as though collecting himself. After a moment, he gave me a wink. I remember his eyelids audibly clicking as they opened and shut. "You don't have to be nervous," he told me. "I'm a fan of yours. Look." He then took his phone out of his pocket, spent a minute searching for something, and then held the phone out to me. I don't know what got into me exactly, sheer curiosity I guess, but I took the phone from his hands to look at the image that he had pulled up. On the greasy screen was a photo of a young woman in an empty white room. The lighting was harsh and flat, lending an uncanny effect to an already bizarre composition. The woman stood close enough to the camera that you could only see her body from the waist up. She held her arm out towards the camera, showing off what seemed to be a puncture wound on her forearm. There was a large bruise encircling the area, and the wound itself was clearly infected, caked with old blood and pus. I looked up from the arm to her face, and despite the strange lighting, I was shocked by how much it looked like my own. She had my eye color and shape, My nose, my jaw, even my freckles. I dropped the phone onto the counter with a gasp and the man scrambled to pick it up. "What the heck is that? Where did you get this photo?" I shouted, losing all pretense of nonchalance. The cafe went quiet, customers looking over at us and a few of my coworkers stepping closer to me. Seeing this, the man scowled and began muttering under his breath. I only caught a few words, uppity and good money among them. He exited the shop in a huff, leaving an untouched cup of coffee on the corner table. After he left, I took 15 in the break room to compose myself. The photograph of the woman burned in my mind's eye. This Angelica seriously could have been my long-lost identical twin. I pulled out my phone and did a preliminary search for Doves, the website. At least I assumed it was a website that the man had mentioned, but I saw nothing that looked like a content-sharing platform. I resolved to do a more thorough investigation once I had returned home and had access to a computer. I made it through the rest of my evening without further incident. I worked the closing shift that day, 2 to 10 at night. When at last my coworkers and I finished all of our closing tasks, I put on my coat and stepped out of the building. The moment I felt the cold air on my face, the thought of walking 2 blocks to my car made me sick with fear. Lydia walked me to my car, which I greatly appreciated. She's a good head shorter than me, but she carries, so I felt a heck of a lot safer braving the dark beside her. When I reached my car, I checked the trunk and back seat. After assuring myself that there was no one waiting for me inside, I bid my friend goodnight and we parted ways. I had plenty of time to reflect during my 30-minute drive home. Embarrassing as it is to admit, I was a former pageant kid. I competed for most of my childhood, at the behest of my former beauty queen mother. As a teenager, my mom tried to get me into modeling. It never went anywhere, but the amount of times my parents made me sit for digitals gave me some long-term scopophobia. To this day, I don't have any public social media as a result. I think anyone would be disturbed if a stranger confronted them in the way that my customer did to me, but my background made the experience impossible to shrug off. I needed to figure out who the heck this Angela woman was, even if I knew I might not like what I discovered. I got back to my apartment at around 10:30 at night, and the first thing that I did was grab a drink, hoping it would soothe my anxiety. Unfortunately, the alcohol seemed to have the complete opposite effect. Never before had I regretted living alone so much. The fact that I lived on the first floor of the apartment building, usually a great convenience, also seemed at that moment to be a point of vulnerability. I checked that all my doors and windows were locked before settling into my desk to begin my research. When checking the lock on my bedroom window, I stole a glance outside at the street. My apartment building has no attached parking garage, so the streets outside are lined with cars at all hours of the day and night. I become familiar with my neighbors' cars to the point where I can recognize when one of them is missing. It's for this reason that I picked up on the unfamiliar Cherokee XJ across the street. The dark blue car, which I initially mistook for my neighbor's Isuzu Trooper, blended in well with its surroundings despite being an unusual model. I don't think I would have noticed it at all had the events of the day not left me so paranoid. I didn't see anyone inside, and it wasn't as though there was anything I could do about it. So I just closed my shutters and focused on the task at hand. At 10:45, I sat down at my desk with nothing but a woman's name and what I believed to be the name of a website. For a full hour, I poked around on the web to no avail. I started off with searches like Angelica arm puncture wound video and Angelica arm white room doves. And then I tried more detailed queries. I searched around increasingly obscure forums, dedicated to all manner of topics, from body horror art to grotesque auto-portraiture photography. Several drinks later, it occurred to me that I might be conducting my investigation in the wrong place, more specifically, on the wrong layer of the web. I hadn't wanted to confront the notion previously, but there was a chance that Angelica was producing some kind of unsavory content, and if that were the case, I wasn't sure how much I'd find about her content on the surface web. Since I don't want anybody reading this to go on to search for the website, I'm not going to get into the details of my search. I will say though that once I got on to Dread, it wasn't nearly as hard to find as I thought. By midnight, I had found what I was looking for. The website's homepage was minimalistic, white text on a pure black background. It had a heading, Doves, and a subheading, 3 friends creating exclusive content with love. Beneath were 3 names that let me know I was in the right place: Angelica, Mary, Adam. I steeled myself and clicked on Angelica. This portion of the site was a single, sprawling page that seemed to scroll for miles. Up at the top was a message, supposedly written by the woman herself. Angelica, 18, durable. I heart my fans. No longer accepting commissions. Price varies on a per video, per photo set basis. Click title for duration, thumbnail, and price info. Videos before 1:14:23 do not have audio. No refunds. Beneath the introductory text was a subheading that read, free sample, and beneath that was an embedded video, 2 minutes in duration. I pressed play. The video buffered for a long while and then began. It faded from black into a familiar shot. In the same white room that I had seen in the customer's picture, there she stood. She, Angelica, looked awful, far worse than she had looked in the photograph. Her jaw clenched and unclenched strangely, and her eyes were wide and darting, like a wild animal's. There was a giant half-healed gash in her cheek, and her left arm was covered in bandages, perhaps suggesting that this video was filmed after the customer's photo was taken. The woman wearing my face gave the camera an uncertain smile. She held up a hand, showing her palm, and then turning it around to show the back. She then slowly set her hand palm down on a small wooden table below her. The camera tilted downwards, following her hand in such a way that indicated another person was filming with a handheld. The camera lingered on her hand for a moment. I heard someone inhale, and then a hammer came down on the woman's hand. After the blow, the camera jerked back up to her face. She started making this pained moaning sound. Her mouth twisted and I saw tears welling up in her eyes. The camera moved back down to her hand, where a deep bruise was already welling up under her skin. I paused the video here to scroll down, reading through the myriad of titles listed beneath it. The most recent link was called Blunt Force 33, followed by Blunt Force 32, and Puncture 12, Eye Infection, Needles Under Nails. I felt dizzy. I had to stand up and pace around the room to keep from puking my guts out. Maybe I should have stopped there, but for whatever reason, I felt like I had some responsibility to finish. I pressed play once more. Down again came the hammer, this time landing atop the knuckle of her forefinger with a crack. 4 more blows rained down on the hand, 1 for each knuckle. By the end, the sounds coming from the woman didn't seem entirely human. It didn't sound like me, but it was hard to tell. I had never been in that kind of pain before. I didn't know what I would sound like. In the last few seconds of the video, the camera was raised and angled downwards such that you could see both Angelica's face and mangled hand. The shot gave the viewer a better view of her chest and the small spade-shaped birthmark a few inches beneath her clavicle. It was this all too familiar mark that removed any lingering ambiguity about what I was watching. Angelica was no coincidence, no circumstantial doppelganger. She was a deep fake of me. When the video ended, I sat staring at the final frame until my laptop went to sleep, too shocked to do anything else. I couldn't believe what was happening to me. I still can't. I've done everything right. All my life I've kept my socials private and generally minded my own business. I've stayed modest, low profile, and out of the spotlight for all of my young adulthood. I never even sent nudes to my ex-boyfriend, despite his insistence, because I was afraid of what would happen to them if we ever had a nasty breakup. As it turned out, we did have a messy breakup. In the immediate aftermath of that video, as I racked my memory for answers, I couldn't help but think of my ex. If I were a public figure, then the culprit behind the deepfakes could have been anyone. But for a nobody like me, it had to be someone close. Someone with access to my private photos. The thought made me shudder. Could my ex really have taken things that far? And did he actually hate me that much? I had a sudden urge to call him and demand answers, but I knew that wouldn't get me far. It would be easy enough for him to lie if he was the culprit, and then he would know that I was onto him. There was much left for me to explore on the Dove's website, but after my discovery, I wasn't in the right state of mind to keep investigating. I thought about calling someone, maybe Lydia or my parents, but for some reason, the thought of doing so filled me with tremendous embarrassment. Even though I knew deep down that it wasn't my fault, I couldn't help but feel ashamed of the videos, even if I had had no role in their creation. I needed sleep, but knew that it would be nearly impossible, and so I popped a few sleeping pills and crossed my fingers. After tossing and turning in bed for a few minutes, I got up to use the bathroom, which required walking down the hallway past my front door. When I got to said door, I stopped, noticing a strange shadow coming from the hallway. It looked as though somebody had placed an object right outside my door. I walked closer to it, about to crouch to peek under the door, when the shadow suddenly moved. It hadn't been an object at all, but rather a person standing in front of my door. I heard their footsteps thudding down the carpeted hallway. By the time that I looked through the peephole, it was too late to see anyone, and I certainly wasn't about to open the door to look for them. I immediately suspected that it had something to do with the blue Cherokee, which was still parked across the street when I stole a glance out the window. Suddenly, I had no desire to sleep anymore, but the pills were already doing their job. I wanted to stay alert in case whoever was outside my door returned, but fighting against the drowsiness was like trying to outrun a monster in a nightmare. The last thing I managed before I slipped into unconsciousness was my own face smiling jubilantly as a hammer smashed my hand into a bloody pulp. By morning, I had nearly convinced myself that the previous night was a dream. There was no unfamiliar car outside my window, no one waiting for me when I opened my apartment door. When I looked at my laptop, however, doves looked back at me. What a shame that it hadn't all been some horrible nightmare. I resumed my investigation, and clicking on any of Angelica's video titles took me to a new page. Each had a preview image and some basic info including the length, date, and description of the video. The prices listed in Bitcoin seemed dependent on two factors: how long the video was and how graphic. Beneath were payment instructions including a wallet address. I didn't know much about crypto and didn't own any, so I didn't purchase any videos as part of my research. Maybe that was for the best. I went back to the Dove's homepage and navigated to Mary. Her page had a similar setup to Angelica's: selfie, profile, sample, and a long list of videos. She was a pretty girl, Mary, and her photo reminded me a bit of Lydia, which made my heart hurt. From the selfie, I guessed that she was about 20 years old. Mary, 18, always clumsy. I'm limited edition. At first glance, it wasn't obvious what limited edition meant. Mary had fewer videos on her page than Angelica, but there was still well over 100. I scrolled down to Mary's sample video, which was also 2 minutes long. I pressed play. Instead of a white room, the video was set in a bedroom. The camera swept over pink walls before landing on a canopy bed. Laid out in the center of this bed, dressed in shorts and an oversized shirt, was a corpse. Long before the cameraman crossed the room, I could see the gash in its throat and the massive puddle of blood that had poured from it. The cameraman got closer and closer, moving with a steadiness that was likely in service of making the editing process easier. Right, this is all edited, I reminded myself. Mary looked incredibly real though. Angelica's sample video had at times dipped into uncanny valley territory, which I had first dismissed as a consequence of the lighting. When it came to Mary's video, everything seemed much more authentic. The camera got so close to the gaping wound that I expected it to be shoved inside. Instead, it was raised to get a better shot of Mary's face. Her mouth hung open and her green eyes were glassy and unfocused. After a few seconds, the camera panned down to her chest, and a gloved hand reached out from behind the camera, tucking a finger into the collar of her shirt and pulling down. I paused the video there. I didn't need to see what happened next. I scrolled down to the video list. Aftermath of a 7-story fall. Walked under a construction site. Farmer lady bales hay. The presiding theme in Mary's videos seemed to be the fact that she had died in or before them. Oddly enough, Mary's videos cost a fair bit more than Angelica's. I guess she had the larger following. The last profile on the Dove's website belonged to Adam. I clicked on his name, scrolled down to view the photo, and was shocked when I recognized the man staring back at me. I couldn't remember his name, but I vividly remembered his face. His deep brown eyes and lopsided grin transported me back to high school. I had gone to school with him, that I knew for certain, and I was fairly sure that his father and mine were friends. If Adam was indeed who I thought he was, then our dads used to play golf together on the weekends. I switched back to Firefox and navigated to my high school's website, which allows you to view yearbook PDFs. I found him in 2019. He had been a senior that year, and finding his portrait in the graduating class section filled me with equal parts relief and sadness. For simplicity, I'll refer to Dove's male model as Adam for the rest of this post, even though, like Angelica, it was only a pseudonym. I sent him a friend request on Discord after getting his handle from a mutual friend. While I waited for him to accept my request, I took a look at his page on Dove's. Adam, 18, doing my best with what I have left. Between Angelica, Mary, and Adam, the latter's niche was the most straightforward. His sample video featured a quad amputee, arms and legs ending in smooth stumps at the elbows and knees. He sat on the floor of a white room identical to Angelica's, looking up at the camera as it moved to his side. A gloved hand gave Adam a beer bottle, which he accepted with a dubious expression. The deepfake, at least I assumed it was also a deepfake, was disturbingly good. capturing all sorts of micro expressions like a raised eyebrow and wrinkle of the nose. The rest of the 2-minute video was Adam attempting, unsuccessfully, to wrench the metal cap off of the bottle. His stumps were dotted with tiny pinpricks of blood by the end. There were only a few dozen videos on his page, and I ascertained from titles like making breakfast or ironing a t-shirt that they involved Adam trying to accomplish basic domestic tasks despite his amputations. Well, with the exception of the first video ever posted to his page, entitled Making a Starfish. I had a pretty good idea what the video entailed, especially since it had the highest price tag of any of the videos that I had seen on the entire website. After an hour, Adam accepted my friend request. I introduced myself and he and I broke the ice for a while, and then I explained the situation to him. He confessed to me that he knew what I was referring to. Below is our Discord conversation from that point on, with square brackets indicating information that I've censored. Sorry for the delay. I had almost finally forgotten about that. I saw a picture of myself on an Unsolved Mysteries forum a couple years ago. Took me a while to track down more pics and figure out, yeah, this is actually a deep fake and not just somebody who looks like me. I didn't know that there were other people involved though. So you never visited Doves itself, like you just saw reports? Right. I acted for a few years when I was a teenager. Super indie films, I wasn't famous at all. I thought it was a coincidence and some nut job randomly picked me as a face model for their art. Now that I know somebody else from my hometown is involved, yeah, that feels personal. Crazy. So you don't know who could have created the videos? No clue. I kind of suspected my ex-boyfriend at first, but unless you jilted him somehow, I don't understand why he would target the two of us. Do you know my ex-boyfriend? Not at all, sorry. Do you know the girl in this photo? Mary. She's the third person on the website. No, I don't recognize her. Do you think that we could meet in person to talk this through? I'm going to file a report with the IC3, and I could seriously use your input. Also, I assume you want to see the website for yourself. I could send you the link. Grace, I seriously appreciate you reaching out, but I really don't want to get involved in this. Are you serious? Why not? A crime has been committed against you and you don't want to help me report it. Our laws on this stuff are dicey as heck. If they didn't put our faces onto nudes, I don't even know if we would have the support of any anti-revenge legislation. If reporting it will help you, then by all means, but realistically, I don't know what can be done and I can't get into some complicated legal battle right now. I don't even know what to say to that. Aren't you angry and disturbed? Of course I am. This stuff has eaten me alive for years. It's followed me everywhere. Yes, I'm angry, but I'm also just really tired. It's the internet and I was stupid enough to put my face on it. You're not angry enough if you can't take 2 seconds to report it. You don't know me. Don't tell me I'm not angry enough. This stuff happens all the time and it'll only start happening more often. You and I aren't special. It doesn't matter if you're old or young or famous or not, or if you've done everything right. It's not like anyone actually got hurt. I'm sorry that this happened to you, seriously. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I just want to move on with my life. Please don't contact me about this again. Adam went offline after that, and my hand shook with rage as I closed my laptop. The way he described the videos like an everyday occurrence, like a fact of modern society that we just had to come to terms with, made me feel like I was going insane. I couldn't accept that such a grotesque distortion of my face, my voice, my whole identity was just something that I should get over. If he wouldn't help me, then I would just have to continue looking for clues on my own. Neither of us recognized Mary, and I couldn't find a perfect match for her even in yearbooks from the early 2010s. The most obvious connection between Adam and myself was the fact that we had attended the same high school, but we also lived in the same neighborhood. If Mary was also local to my hometown, then she likely attended one of the 3 high schools in our area. After digging through my contacts for a while, I reached out to 4 childhood friends who had attended a different high school than myself. I sent a screenshot of Mary's selfie to each of them, pretending like I was trying to get in touch with an acquaintance who had grown up in our town. Only at 1:50 did I look at the clock and realize that I was going to be late for my 2 o'clock shift. I got ready as fast as I could, but still didn't make it to the coffee shop until the 2:45. I parked in my usual street side spot and hurried towards the shop, but before I could open the back door, Lydia emerged from the building. I didn't even get the chance to greet her before she grabbed me by the sleeve of my shirt and started tugging me back towards my car. "Lydia, what?" "He came to see you." My heart sank. I didn't have to ask who he was. "I told him that you quit," she continued. "He came up to me and asked me if you were working today. Told me that he wanted to apologize for yesterday and start fresh. I said he spooked you so bad that you quit, but I don't think he believed me. He just left a few minutes ago." Lydia asked me what I wanted to do, but I didn't know myself. "Did you see what kind of car he was driving?" Lydia hadn't seen, but she had gotten a picture of the man, which she sent to me in case I wanted to file any kind of report. Even if it might seem like an overreaction to some, I knew the importance of starting a paper trail early, and so I thanked Lydia for keeping an eye out for me, and then I phoned the non-emergency line for my car. There was little the police could do at that point, but they told me that I had done the right thing, even if I wasn't certain yet that I was actually being stalked. Feeling slightly better, I picked up some takeout and then returned home. When I got back to my lonely little apartment, I noticed boot prints in the carpet in front of my door, so light that I only noticed them thanks to my paranoia-induced vigilance. I tracked them from the end of my hallway to my door, and then back to the building's exit. I suppose it could have been my landlord, though I doubted it. I completed a thorough sweep of my apartment before settling down for the evening. There was no indication that anybody had been inside since I left, except for a slightly misplaced lamp that I was 99% sure that I had moved a few days prior. After looking around and wedging a chair under my front door handle, I sat down at my desk and scrolled through my new text messages. 3 of my 4 friends had responded. The first 2 apologized, stating that they did not recognize the woman in the photo, but that they would be happy to investigate for me. The third message, however, was everything that I didn't want to hear. 1732. "Hi Grace, long time no hear. Is this a recent photo? Also, where did you see this woman? I'm asking because she looks a lot like a girl that I went to middle school with named Redacted. I hadn't thought of this girl for years until I got your text, so I googled her name and it seems like she went missing in 2023. My blood ran cold. I looked up at the name that I had been sent and found only 3 local results. A middle school track and field team roster, a library art competition from over 10 years ago, and a missing persons report. Redacted, County Sheriff's Office. Date filed, October 17th, 2023. Reporting officer, redacted. Missing person, name, redacted. Date of birth, 4/9/2003. Age, 20. Sex, female. Race, Caucasian. Eyes, green. Height, 5'6". Weight, 125 pounds. Hair, blonde, shoulder length. Last seen wearing a blue flannel shirt, black jeans, white Converse sneakers. Last known location. Redacted was last seen leaving the Redacted Cafe in downtown Redacted, California at approximately 5:20 p.m. on October 16th, 2023. She was walking south on Main Street in the direction of her home but did not arrive. She was carrying a dark green backpack. Circumstances: family reported Redacted missing at 8:45 p.m. after she failed to return home and was not reachable by phone. According to friends, Redacted had no plans to leave town and did not express any intent to run away. Her phone last pinged near Redacted Road around 6:10 p.m. Investigative status: BOLO issued to neighboring jurisdictions. Local search and canvass initiated. No confirmed sightings after 6 p.m. Phone and social media activity inactive since disappearance. There was a photo of Mary at the bottom of the report. She looked younger than she did in her Dove selfie, and I spent a long time looking at her green eyes, thinking about how full of life they seemed. Her disappearance could have been completely random. She could have run away completely on her own volition for all I knew. And yet she could have just as easily stumbled into the hands of one of her fans, and I shuddered to think where she was or what she was doing now if that were the case. I filed 2 reports that night, one to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center regarding doves, and one to my county sheriff's department regarding Mary. Before going to sleep for the night, I also opened up Discord, navigating to my conversation with Adam. Hoping that what I had found might bring him to his senses, I sent him a link to Mary's report. "Someone did get hurt," I said. I forewent the sleeping pills that night as a precaution, instead spending hours tossing around in bed thinking of Mary. Wherever she was, as unlikely as it seemed, I hoped that she was all right. When I awoke, it was to the sound of a scream. The noise tore me straight out of a nightmare about the White Room. I remember sitting bolt upright, unsure as to whether the sound had come from myself or somewhere else. When a few seconds passed without further commotion, I decided that it hadn't come from a human at all, but instead an animal or even a passing car. Whatever the case, I was wide awake, and so I grabbed my laptop and almost instinctively navigated to Doves. Checking my email, I saw that I had not yet heard back from either the police or the IC3, but I had expected as much. So little time had passed after all. What I had not expected was the reply that I received from Adam, which he had sent just after midnight. "Okay, let's talk. You're going to school at Redacted, right? I live around 90 minutes southwest from there. I don't have a car right now, but if you want to talk in person and you have time to kill, we can meet up in my town." I was pleasantly surprised that he had come around, though I wasn't exactly sure what had changed his mind. Seeing Mary's missing persons report likely convinced him that there was a real danger in what we had discovered. Desperate for answers and itching for something to do while I waited for the police, I accepted his invitation. Seeing that Adam was online despite the early hour, I gave him a call, although he quickly declined it. "I can't talk right now. Sorry, I guess it is still early. I'm happy to meet you and I don't mind driving out." "Cool. Let's not do a cafe or a restaurant though. I don't really want to be overheard. There's a trail near my house where we can have some privacy. I'll send you the address of the trailhead if that works for you. Can you do 6:30 p.m.? "Yeah, I can do any time today, really. Make sure to bring your phone and laptop and any other electronic devices that you've used recently." "On the hike?" "I was hoping that we could go to my place after. I'll explain in more detail in person, but I have some theories about how the deepfakes are being made and I need your help to test them out. Sending the address now." Making a plan gave me comfort, and after Adam and I finished working out the logistics of our impromptu get-together, I managed to catch a few more hours of sleep. I then spent the late morning attempting to distract myself with schoolwork. When that failed, I returned to Tor. Instead of going straight to Doves, I searched for the forums that Adam had mentioned. I did find one relevant conversation on Mirror Frame, which seemed like a website for rehosting lost or banned videos. Help ID, the actress in this video, read the title of the post. Attached was a 20-second clip from one of Angelica's videos. Puncture 12, I realized. I had spent so long staring at the sample images that I could recognize this particular video from the lighting and the framing alone. I think it was this, the fact that I had become so familiar with this content, that frightened me even more so than the video itself, which featured Angelica getting stabbed in the calf with what looked like a marlin spike. This particular clip of Puncture 12 had audio. Unlike Angelica's sample video, which had all been grunts and sobs, this video actually had dialogue. She didn't say much, but the few words that Angelica said, she said in my voice. Somehow hearing myself beg someone to stop hurting me made me far more nauseous than the deepfake visuals ever had. The only vaguely positive thing about the thread was the single comment. Good luck. The Doves team is extremely private. Zero info about the models. I'd be surprised if that girl actually exists. I used my phone to take a picture of Puncture 12 and then set my laptop down. I had learned 2 new things from the forum. The first was that whoever was behind Doves had access not just to photos of me, but to recordings of my voice. This eliminated some of my earlier suspects, including the modeling agency from my teenage years. While he would have had enough content on me to make a deepfake, I never met him in person, and I never sent him any video recordings of me speaking. It would have been impossible for him to replicate my voice so convincingly. My second epiphany had to do with the sole comment on the thread. For whatever reason, Dove's maker was protecting my true identity. If this were someone who had hated me personally, they would want to put me in danger. They would want their crazed fans to know exactly who I was. I couldn't reconcile the malevolence of their actions with this small saving grace. Inspired to continue my search, I punched in Dove's URL and waited, and then waited some more. Eventually I got the generic onion site not reachable screen. No error code, no redirect. I refreshed. Nothing. I waited a few minutes and nothing. I reopened Tor. Nothing. The site was gone, at least temporarily. I wanted to be optimistic and believe that the FBI had taken them down after my complaint, but I doubted it. It was more likely the case that they had relocated to a new .onion address or rotated to a fallback link, but why? Did they know that someone was onto them? Was it something that Adam had done? I spent all afternoon trying to find out where the site had migrated to, but it was hopeless. I left my apartment at around 5, and the minute that I walked out of my door, I was overcome with a sense of relief. Looking back on it, I had felt sick all day, but I hadn't entirely noticed until I had stepped outside. Due to traffic, I didn't arrive at the trailhead until nearly 7 o'clock. As soon as I had parked, I received a text message from Lydia. No creep today, but I still think you should sleep at my place tonight. I don't like thinking of you alone in that apartment. By the way, I told Ben what's been going on, and he says he thinks he saw the guy get into his car yesterday. He said it was a Jeep Cherokee XJ. Reading that made my gut churn. Of course, I had already suspected it, but the confirmation that Angelica's fan knew where I lived was horrific. I decided that I would sleep in a hotel that night, only briefly swinging by my apartment to grab a change of clothes. I also resolved to visit the police station in person the next day to see what could be done. I texted Lydia my plans, and then I focused my attention on my meeting with Adam. The hills were a beautiful little swath of nature, quiet but not too isolated from the city. There were a few other cars in the parking lot and a few people walking their dogs. I did not, however, see anybody that looked like Adam. I messaged him that I had arrived and he quickly replied, "Cool, I'm on the trail. Make a left at the first fork and I'm sitting on the bench." I got out of my car and started to walk. It was a warm evening and under any other circumstances, I would have been delighted by the balmy breeze and colors of golden hour. I walked up the trail for a few minutes and saw the fork in question. I looked to the left, but thanks to the curve of the trail, it was difficult to see very far ahead. "Hey, I'm at the fork. Take the trail on the left. Can you come down?" I waited for a few minutes. Adam kept starting to type and then stopping. The sun was starting to set at that point, and I didn't want to be on an unfamiliar hiking trail after dark if I could help it. I gave Adam another call, but once again, he immediately declined. "Walk down the trail on the left." "Why can't you just walk down and meet me here? You're freaking me out." "I'm like 30 feet away from the start of the trail, it's fine." "I don't see you." "But I see you." I looked up from my phone, startled. There was no one else around, not even up on the ridges that overlooked the trailhead. No way I was going any further up that trail. I waited around dumbly for a while longer and then decided to call it a day. As I turned around and started walking back to my car, I heard a man's voice say my name. I froze for a minute, whipping my head back in the direction of the trail. I opened my mouth to respond, but when I still didn't see anyone, I closed it and ran back to my car, thoroughly spooked. Though I didn't see anybody following me, I started the engine immediately and began my drive back home. The entire way back to my apartment, I felt like screaming. That whole meeting had either been an elaborate joke or worse, a setup. I considered the possibility that it was Adam behind the deepfakes. He was a software engineer and certainly had the technical know-how to create them. He had been strange and standoffish throughout every one of my interactions with him, and seemed to have something to hide. He grew up in my town and easily could have lied about knowing Mary. Despite all of these factors, though, he was missing a motive, and furthermore, he himself was a victim. When I got back to my apartment building before getting out of my car, I scrolled through my message history with Adam. Not only had his perspective on doves changed since the day prior, but so too had his texting style. It was subtle and it could have been explained away by him typing on a computer versus a phone, but the text that he had sent me that day felt more formal. Better grammar, fewer sporadic line breaks. Maybe something had happened to him the day before. Maybe the Adam that I was texting on that day was not the same person that I had been texting previously. Again, it could have been a coincidence, but I still planned to bring it up with the police the next day. I went inside of my apartment after that, dejected and exhausted. Every new lead that I had uncovered only brought me more questions, and now I couldn't even unwind in the comfort of my own home. That heavy, nauseous feeling that I had had all morning returned in full force. Once I had stepped into my apartment and turned on the lights, I planned to use the bathroom, grab a few things, and make my way to the cheap Motel 6 uptown. I threw my bag down, grabbed my phone, and headed to my minuscule bathroom. It was pretty stuffy in there, and so I decided to let some air in. Putting both hands on the window frame, I noticed that the latch was undone. Had I forgotten to lock the window the night before? I could have sworn that I had locked it. The thought of sleeping with an unlocked window while someone was actively stalking me terrified me, but it was nothing compared to what had happened next. I opened the window, and the bathroom was filled with a screech that sounded exactly like a scream. I knew exactly that it was the sound that I had heard in the morning, the one that had woken me up. Someone had opened my window in the night, What if he had let himself inside? What if he never left? Suddenly, I got the sense that I was not alone in my apartment. Quickly, I locked the bathroom door, and then I tried to listen for movement over the deafening pounding of my heart. I thought that I heard the faintest sound of fabric rustling, and my every nerve screamed in response. "Get out," they said, and I listened. I threw the window open all the way and jumped out. Before sprinting down the street, I stole one last look in the bathroom, just in time to see the handle turn as somebody tried the locked door. After that, I ran like crazy to the first open public building that I could find, a 24/7 convenience store a quarter of a mile from my place. I phoned the police from inside, and when they arrived, I told them about everything. Doves, the customer, Mary, my strange encounter on the trail, my suspicion that something may have happened to Adam. Thankfully, they took my words very seriously, especially since I had already started a paper trail and since I had several witnesses from the cafe to back me up. Before they took me down to the station to file an official report, they escorted me back to my apartment and searched the place. There was no one inside but the unlocked front door and the plethora of stolen items. Everything from my diary to some of my clothes made it pretty obvious what had happened. I booked a flight home that night and left town the following morning. I was never close with my parents, even less so after the crap they put me through as a teenager, but I desperately needed an escape. If I had it my way, I would have packed up and moved to the middle of nowhere and never be seen by anyone ever again. But since I couldn't do that, I retreated to the only place that I could think of. My hometown. The place where all this Dove's business seemingly began. If nothing else, maybe I could finally find the answers that I was looking for there. I watched the sunrise from 40,000 feet in the air, and the sight soothed me tremendously. I looked down at my phone, swiping back and forth between two screenshots that I had sent myself, one of Adam's selfie and one of Mary's. I studied them like a mother whose adult kids had long moved far away from home. There was a terrible ache in my heart as I thought of all that they had likely been through, and the fact that I didn't know if either of them were safe at that moment. I'm gonna find out what happened to you, I thought. Not a wish, but a promise. My parents picked me up from the airport. Prior to my flight, I had told them everything over the phone, which saved me the discomfort of a face-to-face explanation. The ride home was awkward and quiet, and my dad spent most of it consoling my distraught mother, like she was the one who needed emotional support. I spent the next 5 days mostly in my room, too nervous to stray far from the house. I felt I might turn down any street corner and run into Angelica's creator. I returned to Tor looking for any discussion of doves that I might have overlooked. I revisited the Mirror Frame forum and saw yet another post by the same user who had inquired about Angelica's identity. "Is doves down for good?" asked the user, dismay palpable through the screen. There were 3 replies to this post, all of which confirmed that the website had disappeared without a trace. I figured they had simply changed URLs, but if loyal customers could no longer track them down, then perhaps doves really had ceased operations. I would have been ecstatic if I wasn't concerned it would impact my case. After a week with few updates from either the police or the FBI, I started to emerge from my room more frequently, trying to rebuild bridges between my parents and myself. My mom and dad weren't bad people exactly, just distant. There had been that whole pageantry thing in my early childhood, and then my failed attempt at modeling when I was a teen. Sometimes it felt as they viewed me more as a side hustle than a daughter. At least they had calmed down considerably once I had turned 15 or so. My dad came into some money thanks to sports betting, and he was generous with his earnings. He put me through both private high school and all 4 years of college, and I knew he spoiled my mom rotten with vacations. I remembered that my dad had at one point been friends with Adam's stepdad, who I'll call Mr. Doe. I broached the topic over dinner one night, and the inquiry made my dad stiffen. "John's son. No, I can't say I knew the boy all that well," he said. "He seemed nice enough, a little awkward maybe, one of those computer geeks." "Oh, pot meat kettle," my mom said with a laugh, oblivious to the shifting tone of the conversation. My mom and dad knew only that I had found a deep fake of myself and that a fan had broken into my apartment. I hadn't mentioned Adam and Mary's involvement, partly because I just didn't want to talk about it, and partly because I didn't want my mom telling the whole neighborhood. "What about Mr. Doe himself? You guys were friends when I was in high school, right?" I suppose John and I golfed every now and then." This time it was my mom's turn to stiffen. Her expression of displeasure departed from her face as quickly as it had arrived, but I caught it nonetheless. Oddly, it seemed to be the mention of golfing, not Mr. Doe, that agitated her. I asked a few more questions, and then the three of us fell into an uneasy silence. After a solid minute of this, my dad slapped both his palms on the wooden dining table, startling both my mother and I. He looked up with a smile. "You know what? It's been too long since the three of us did anything together. I say we need a vacation. Grace more than anyone. Don't you miss his Tapa love?" he asked my mother, who all but squealed in affirmation. "Dad, I can't go to Mexico, not with everything going on right now." My dad's smile tightened a little. "Kiddo, everything going on right now is why you need to get out of here. I want you to stay as far away from that man as possible, and the police up north are already working with you remotely. They can call you with any updates. Besides, you're a victim, not a suspect. They're not going to restrict your travel." I wasn't sure what to make of my dad's plan, but the thought of getting out of the neighborhood was a pleasant one. I reached out to the detective on my case about leaving the country short term, and while he wasn't exactly pleased, he said that I was free to move around as I wished. I started packing, and when I couldn't find the swimsuit that I wanted to bring, my mom suggested checking the storage bins in the attic, the entrance to which was in my parents' room. With some reluctance, I pulled down the folding ladder and descended into the dingy, claustrophobic place, more like a crawl space than a room. I didn't find my suit, but I did find many mementos from my childhood. Toys, books, photo albums, schoolwork, and an absurd amount of home videos copied to DVD and VHS. My parents had always preferred to look at my life through a camera lens. I spent so long rifling through my old essays from high school that I forgot what I was looking for altogether. I returned to the attic several times after that, each new visit unlocking some previously forgotten memory. For a few days after my dad's impromptu vacation suggestion, I was in limbo. There were no updates to my case, and my endless queries about doves yielded little to no information. My only success was learning a few more facts about Mary through the abandoned Facebook profile of her mother, whom I'll call Mrs. Rowe. The profile, despite belonging to the mother, almost exclusively featured Mary. There seemed to be an endless stream of posts documenting Mary's childhood, everything from her 5th birthday party to her junior varsity soccer games. I never found mention of a Mr. Rowe, either on social media or in the news, so I had a feeling that Mary's father was out of the picture. As for Mrs. Rowe, I could barely find a thing about the woman. She seemed to have disappeared off the face of the earth after the search for Mary had died down. It seemed unjust in a way. How was it fair that her daughter was plastered all over the internet forever, where she had escaped its panoptic gaze unscathed? On April 2nd, 2025, I received a text from the detective up north. He asked if I was available for a video call, as opposed to our usual phone conversation, which immediately told me that they had found something. I expected to hear that they had discovered who had made the deepfakes, or at the very least, that they had found my stalker. Instead, they told me that Adam was dead. His corpse had been found in a ravine in the hills near his home, not far from where he had asked me to meet only a week prior. He was found by a hiker, and though his body was racked with broken bones from the fall, his cause of death was exsanguination from a series of stab wounds in his back. The news shocked me to my core. After our last interaction, I had been certain that either Adam was the perpetrator or in some way working with Dove's creator. I thought back to our texts, to his change in tone and his sudden desire to meet me in person. Maybe he had confronted the person behind the deepfakes, who had murdered him and then tried to do the same to me. I told the detective my theory. I don't remember much of the next few days. I spent most of it in bed trying to sleep off an ever-worsening numbness. Adam was dead and Mary was missing and probably dead. If I dared to leave the cage of my parents' house and try to live a normal life, I would very likely follow my fellow birds to the grave. And for what? What had I or any of us done to deserve any of it? For most intents and purposes, this story ends on April 6th, 2025. I woke up in the evening after a day of fitful nightmares. My mom was out with some of her girlfriends and had sent me a text stating that she wouldn't be back until the early morning. My dad was in his office, likely making travel arrangements. After the news about Adam, the police had asked me to postpone any trips out of the US. Yet for some reason, my dad still seemed dead set on getting us out of the country. My bedroom started to feel suffocating. I went to the attic, maybe hoping to find comfort in memories of a simpler time. I spent a while reading my thoroughly uninteresting diaries from middle school, and then I happened upon a small, leather-bound journal. My mother's name was written on the inside cover. It must have been with my things by mistake. I sat cross-legged on the dusty floor and I looked inside. The journal's entries began back in 2011 but only ended in 2020. It was unfinished and sparsely populated, and most of it seemed to be about my dad. Complaints about his late nights at his engineering firm, sadness over unnoticed attempts for emotional connection. I regarded some of what she wrote as unfair, but I was also sympathetic. The reflections were those of a very lonely person. I was about to close the journal and move on when I came across an entry from 2017. He's out again today, despite my begging him to spend a little time with me and Grace for once. Why do I even bother? It was bad enough when it was just his buddy John Doe, but now those two are always with that Jane Roe woman from across town. They golf together every single weekend, always huddled up on the green scheming like mobsters at a wake. Does he think that I'm blind to his little menage a trois? What a joke. I felt like my heart stopped beating. Suddenly, gruesomely, everything clicked into place. Who would have been capable of creating Angelica? Someone with plenty of access to photos and videos of me, as well as recordings of my voice. Someone who would want to protect my identity so that fans couldn't trace the videos back to my family. The same would have been true of the person, no, of the people behind Mary and Adam's videos. At that moment, the bedroom door opened. "You up there, Gracie?" my dad said, and I remember my whole body freezing in place. I closed the journal and backed away from the hatch. There was nowhere to run or hide. The ladder squeaked as my dad climbed up the rungs one by one. He peeked his head over the lip of the attic entrance and stared at me. "Everything all right?" I stared back wordlessly. I couldn't help it, I've always been a terrible liar. After a few seconds, I mumbled some excuse, but fear made my words quiet and unconvincing. He started climbing further into the attic, resting his forearms on the floor. Not knowing what to expect, I got to my feet, crouched like a cornered animal to accommodate the low ceiling. I told him not to come any closer, and his face darkened. He kept asking me, "What's wrong, Gracie? Why do you look so scared?" But with every word, his voice tone became less concerned and more angry. At last, my good sense scrambled by fear. I asked him, "Why did you do that to me?" He froze. The way his face was completely lit from underneath gave it a flattened, uncanny effect. For a second, he looked a lot like Angelica in her white room. "Oh," he said, and then came a stretch of silence so loud it made my eardrums ring. For some reason, after he said that, he started smiling. Really, it was more baring his teeth. There was no humor in his eyes. I couldn't read his expression whatsoever. I had no clue if he was angry, guilty, sad, or something else. Then he descended the rickety ladder. I crept my way over to the hatch. The ladder could not be pulled up from inside, so I knew that my best option was to make a run for it. Cautiously, I peered down through the square hole in the attic floor, just in time to see my dad procure a handgun from his nightstand. We locked eyes for a moment, and then with that same smile on his face, he lifted the gun to his temple and pulled the trigger. I watched, transfixed, from the attic as blood rushed from the hole in his head. I stared at his body crumpled and lifeless on the same soft rug I used to play on as a baby. I stared and stared until my mom came home and her screams broke me out of my trance at last. When the police arrived, I explained everything, including my hunch about the involvement of Adam and Mary's parents. Adam's stepfather was arrested the following day, and it wasn't long before the police extracted a confession from him. He said that he, along with Mrs. Rowe and my father, had begun producing and selling the deepfakes when the three of us were in high school. Doves had gained an extremely devoted fan base, and the revenue generated by the videos was immense. I couldn't believe my eyes when I finally saw how much money my father had tucked away. As of my writing this on May 5th, 2025, Mr. John Doe is still awaiting trial. Despite his attempts to paint my father as the manipulative mastermind behind the operation, it seemed pretty clear that the three adults were equal partners. Neither Mary nor her mother have yet been found, and unfortunately, neither is my stalker. I was hopeful at first, certain that the police would find some of his DNA in my apartment and swiftly apprehend him. With every passing day, that scenario seems less likely, and I'm trying my best to stay optimistic. I remain hopeful that one day I'll be able to see a dark blue Jeep on the road without my heart skipping a beat. You know, on one hand, I can't believe what happened to me, and on the other, it seems like the most natural thing in the world. Every time I open Instagram, I'm greeted by some idiot parent posting endless photos of their underage children. Every time I look at Twitter, I see some AI-generated slop of real people doing insane, outrageous things. Of course, I'll always hate him for what he did, but in a strange way, I can understand the siren call of an eager, well-paying audience. I'm sure in his head he staved off the guilt by spending the money on me and my mom. I wonder how long he would have kept going had I not confronted him. Well, I have to get going again. I can hear my mom crying in the other room of the hotel suite that's become our temporary residence. I thought I would be bitter, but instead it brings me comfort to console her. It helps me keep my mind off of the image of his dying body, and how the trapdoor of the dark attic framed it just like a viewfinder. Justin Phonenauer, Swaggity Swoot, Lunas TV, Omni Rubix, Dino, yours truly, Andrew Harrington, Malcolm Black, Mark Norman, Damon McCory, Kathy McGuire, SWAT, Mina Lynn, Takio Zarilla, Sleepy Shroomy, Richard French, Miss Outridge, Jimmy Griffin, Leon Knott, Sonic GMD, That One Woodsman, Talamagara, Meat Casher, Die Screaming, Nelson Asada, MB Massacre 91, Rain, Big Country Allen, Deggy, Wayward Son, Caleb Windsor, Never Enough, Russell and Flo, Stevie B7649,